Takes your breath away, doesn't it? You wouldn't have whistleblowers without whistleblower attorneys. Stephen M. Kohn is the executive director of the National Whistleblower Center. He has authored 8 books on whistleblowing law, is known as the definitive expert, and it also includes the new Whistleblower's Handbook, a step-by-step guide in doing what is right and protecting yourself, which I believe is outside. His historical research led to the rediscovery of America's first whistleblower law, passed by the Founding Fathers during the height of the American Revolution on July 30th, 1778. Stephen is a history buff. He will recount the history of this landmark legislation for you today. But before he gets up, before Stephen, there was his mother, Corinne. Stand up, please. "92 years old. You keep on chugging." Stephen, thank you for all you've done for whistleblowers.
First, I want to thank everyone for coming and for caring and for doing what you all have done. I also just want to mention a little bit about Jane. She was one of the first women FBI agents. She had jurisdiction, what's known as Indian Country, a massive reservation in North Dakota, and the only agent in that reservation, and the only woman agent all around. And she led the charge on fighting child sex abuse, violence against women, and essentially was the champion of all women and child victims on those reservations, created a revolution there. She filed a discrimination suit. She became a whistleblower. Her career was destroyed. But when we did her trial, and it was in front of a jury, which many federal whistleblowers will never have that ability, but we were able to get her to a jury. And the jury heard her story, and they heard the FBI witnesses. They gave her the largest award permitted under law. In fact, even larger, and it had to be cut down. And one of the reasons she won is because 2 United States attorneys took to the stand and said what she did and the contributions she made. And they were just, when you read her story or learn of it, just unbelievable for the approximately 14 years. She was the woman, she was that woman agent. And just one quick story, when she busted a guy for the most brutal rape of a child conceivable. Cannot go into the details, but many of these crimes had been ignored. But when she showed up to do the interrogation and got the confession, the rapist wouldn't talk to anybody. But when he heard that Jane was at the jail, and Jane said, "I've got cigarettes," that rapist said, "I'll talk to the woman FBI agent." And she got the confession that day. He went to jail for life. So I just want to say thank you, Jane, for what you've done. The footnote. When she stood up for her rights, the Bureau went after her. I think we must have fought that case for how many years? 15 years. She won every case. But the resources that the Bureau put in to destroy her, it's just unforgivable. But many of you have lived that yourselves. We do this event on Whistleblower Day because this is the day for whistleblowers. We must reclaim our history. 240 years ago today, our founding forefathers passed the first whistleblower law. And why that is significant is because these are the people who created the United States of America. They wrote our Constitution. They created the basic framework of our government. And within 6 months of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, at the height of the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, They were confronted with whistleblowers who were exposing misconduct by the commander of the U.S. Navy, including mistreatment of British prisoners, charges that could be considered embarrassing to the government. One of the whistleblowers, and there were 10 on a ship outside of the Providence Harbor, one of them, they all signed the petitions. One jumped ship, made it to the Congress with the petitions, and said, please help us. And at that day, that moment, our founding fathers had to deal with whistleblowers. And how is our government going to view them for the future? And as you heard from Senator Grassley, they suspended that commander of the Navy. They listened to the whistleblowers. But the commander was not through with them. He was a powerful person. His brother had been the governor of Rhode Island. He came from a very powerful family in Rhode Island. So he filed seditious libel lawsuits against the whistleblowers in Rhode Island court. And they caught 2 of them and threw them into jail. And from jail, they wrote to Congress. I'm going to read you a letter. We dug it up out of the archives. And it's pretty much, having represented whistleblowers for 34 years, this is what I hear daily. I'm going to quote from their letter from Providence Jail, written on July 8th, 1778. Your petitioners, not being persons of affluent fortunes, but young men who have spent most of their time in service of their country in arms against its cruel enemies, finding themselves arrested for doing what they believed and still believed was nothing but their duty. Held to bail in a state where they were strangers, without connections, without the ability to defend themselves against a powerful, artful person with all of the advantages of his office and the wealth he has amassed in the current war, humbly ask Congress for their intervention. And that, in my view, was the turning point. And on July 30th, Congress again convened. They heard the evidence. And they enacted America's first whistleblower law, calling upon every inhabitant of the United States to call to the appropriate attention of the authorities crimes. And copies of that resolution are on your tables through Whistleblower Appreciation Day, and the senator read that resolution. But they did 2 other things. They voted money to pay for the lawyers in Rhode Island. They hired an attorney who would later become the Attorney General, a brilliant young lawyer. They wanted the best. And that lawyer defended them in the criminal case, and they won that case. They also released all the documents. There was no Freedom of Information Act. They didn't care if the British read those documents. And they spent, and we actually went to the archives because I wanted to see if it was true. I mean, I'm reading the resolutions, and a law clerk pulled out the check from the Continental Congress for the $1,400 written to the lawyer. And what I found just dumbfounding was that is at the height of the American Revolution. The Continental Congress was broke. They needed every penny for guns and bullets for the Revolution. The Founding Fathers would be hung for treason if they lost the Revolution. They're not going to lose an election or be embarrassed in a poll. They would be hung. But they took that money and gave it to defend the whistleblower. And it's clear why. They were giving that money and that resolution to defend their vision of democracy that Thomas Jefferson had put in the Declaration of Independence. What would be worth winning the revolution if the people didn't have the right to expose government misconduct? Why win? So they stood up, for you. And we must remember this. We must fight for this. We must ensure that this incredible act of democracy is remembered. Thank you. And I'll introduce Alan.